Preston Albright Wade III had brought 3 lawyers, not one. 3 seated in a line at the counsel table in matching gray suits, like a firm photo that had walked into the 255th Judicial District Court and decided to redecorate. The lead attorney, a man named Gerald Fox, whose firm had offices in Dallas, Austin, and Houston, had a leather portfolio so thick it had a spine like a hardcover novel, and he set it on the table with the quiet confidence of a man who had never lost anything he truly wanted to keep. Camille Wade sat across from all 3 of them with one attorney and a grocery bag. The grocery bag was because she'd run out of folders. 14 months of documentation, canceled checks, school withdrawal records, a pediatrician's note about her youngest daughter's anxiety diagnosis, lease agreement showing 3 addresses in 2 years, and she'd run out of folders 2 weeks ago and hadn't had time to buy more. Because Camille Wade, who had spent 11 years managing the household, the children, the staff, and the social calendar of a man who owned 9 hotels in 4 states, had not had time because she was now doing all of that alone, without the staff, without the calendar, without the house. She was 44 years old and she had a grocery bag. Preston Albright Wade III did not look at her once. He had not looked at her directly in 14 months, not at the mediation that collapsed after 40 minutes, not at the temporary order hearing where Gerald Fox had argued so skillfully about. Preston's operational liquidity constraints that the temporary support came in at less than half of what the guidelines required, not now. He had the practiced 1,000-yard focus of a man who has decided that a person can be made to disappear simply by refusing to see them. He was 50 years old, silver at the temples, and wearing a suit that Camille recognized because she had picked it out. She had picked out most of his suit. She had picked out his cologne, his ties, the cufflinks he wore to the ribbon cutting at the Frisco property in 2019, where he gave a speech about family values, and the camera caught her smiling in the 3rd row. She had smiled. She was good at that. Gerald Fox opened the proceedings with a motion, a new motion filed that morning, requesting a 60-day continuance to allow for an independent valuation of the Wade Hospitality Group's current assets, which he described as in significant transition. It was the 3rd motion for continuance. It was the 3rd time the word transition had been used to describe a company that had posted $11 million in revenue the previous fiscal year. Judge Vonda B read the motion, turned to the last page, set it down, denied. Gerald Fox adjusted his portfolio. Your Honor, the complexity of the asset structure. Counsel, she said it the way you say a word to indicate the conversation is now moving in a different direction. I have read every filing in this case. I have read all 3 continuance requests. I have read the amended financial disclosure, and I have read the original financial disclosure, and I would like to ask you something directly. She clasped her hands on the bench. Are those 2 documents describing the same company? A silence moved through the room like weather. Gerald Fox said carefully, Your Honor, asset valuation during an ongoing corporate restructuring. Mr. Fox? She looked at him the way a teacher looks at a student who is smart enough to know better. I'm going to ask Mr. Wade. Preston shifted in his chair almost imperceptibly, the first movement he'd made in 10 minutes. He looked at Judge Vonda B with the expression of a man accessing a version of himself he kept for difficult rooms, measured, reasonable, the kind of man who understood that this was simply a process, and processes had outcomes, and outcomes could be managed. Mr. Wade, Judge Vonda B said, in 2023, while this court order was active and while your children were living with their mother in a rental property in Garland, your company opened 2 new properties, one in Scottsdale, one in Nashville. She opened a page. Who signed the development agreements on those properties? Preston said, my signature is on most company documents. Who decided to open them? A beat. I did. So the company had enough operational capacity to expand into 2 new markets, she said, but not enough liquidity to meet a child support obligation for 3 children who needed their father to show up financially the same way he showed up for a ribbon cutting. She did not raise her voice. She never raised her voice. That was the thing about it. The temperature in the room changed, not because she got louder, but because every word landed with the full weight of someone who had done the reading. I want to be very clear about what this court has found, Mr. Wade. Not suspected, found. Camille was looking at the bench. She had stopped touching the grocery bag. This court has found that the amended disclosure filed in November omitted the Scottsdale LLC, the Nashville Development Trust, and a personal investment account at a private bank in Colorado. Judge Vonda B looked at Preston directly. You brought 3 attorneys today. That tells me you understood that the truth was going to require significant management. She paused. What you may not have understood is that this bench is not something you can manage. In the gallery, a woman who appeared to be Camille's mother put her hand over her mouth. The ruling came down in parts, each one landing cleaner than the last. Full recalculation of support based on actual verified income, retroactive arrears covering 14 months, sanctions for the disclosure failures, and a forensic accountant appointed by the court, not by either party, to review the Wade Hospitality Group financials going back 3 years. Gerald Falk stood to object, and Judge Vonda B said, "It's already signed, counsel," and it was. Preston Albright Wade III left the 255th with 3 lawyers and considerably less than he'd arrived with. Camille left with a grocery bag full of receipts that had finally been received. Some men spend their whole lives learning how to make things disappear until they walk into a room where someone is paid by the state of Texas to make things reappear.